What's up, eco hackers? Welcome to the show. This is Cutting Edge Podcast, August 2022. But great, welcome to the show. And today we're going to be discussing Octagram. So, fair warning. Let's see. Okay, so we're about 14 minutes in. So, fair warning, Octagram is kind of dramatic. Well, I mean, it is dramatic. It's like very dramatic. It's been something we've been working on for a long time. And obviously, it's based on the Enneagram, but some of the problems that we notice with the Enneagram, and how the Enneagram is actually being paired up with Myers-Briggs Type Indicator as a system. A lot of people don't realize that the Enneagram actually, in terms of the Enneagram tri-type, in terms of an output specific to Enneagram, that the Enneagram is actually trying to attempt to identify a person's ego, aka their nature, as well as nurture simultaneously. And this is where it gets really confusing. This is where it starts muddying the waters. When you look at things from an octagram perspective, we actually take all of the nature out with the nurture and keep them separate. Enneagram tries to attempt to do everything all at once. And then when you pair Enneagram up with Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, it just adds even more confusion because the ego selected by Enneagram oftentimes does not actually match the ego that is selected by Myers-Briggs Type Indicator at the same time. And this leads to further confusion. And this is ultimately one of the reasons why people have essentially abandoned both systems simultaneously. And, most of the laymen's out there are just, they're content to entirely reject, that point of view. Yes, I'm going to clear the drawing. So we're going to have the whiteboard joining us today for the first time. But yeah, Sarah is saying in the chat that why can't they coexist? I was never confused and have abandoned neither. The thing is that while you are smarter than most people, Sarah, other people using them, laymen's as I'm calling them, simple folk, people who are ignorant of psychology or all of the nuance, they just don't know, and it muddies the waters, and then they end up abandoning both systems. This is why Jungian analytical psychology or anything relating to 16 personalities is entirely rejected. Most people would rather turn to the zodiac than ever consider a 16 personality model. They'd rather assume a base 3 model of the zodiac instead of a base 4 model when it comes to personality typing in terms of identifying someone's persona or their ego. Again, it muddies the waters, and it causes people to just reject the system entirely because they just innately know that something is wrong. And that's because the ego provided by Enneagram is not the same as the ego provided by MBTI, and they're often used together. It's no secret that when you're on the CS Joseph or the Ego Hackers Discord server, oftentimes people say, I'm an XYZ type with XYZ tri-type. The thing is, though, is that you can't have tri-type with an MBTI ego at the same time. So let's actually look at why and how that is using the trusty whiteboard, shall we? Yes, the whiteboard is back. So let's look at a few different ways. Let's pick on Sarah today because I'm in the mood to pick on Sarah. We're going to pick on Sarah today. So Sarah's an ISTP, right? She's an ISTP. And according to 16personalities.com, she would be an ISTP-T, aka turbulent, right? And this is nice because I know we've been talking a lot about cognitive focus recently. But cognitive focus, this would basically mean that she is shadow focused, from a 16 personalities point of view. So. But if you're going to look at, and I am going to get this wrong, so I apologize in advance. If we are going to look at a different way of doing it, let's say she was an ISTP 5W7 or something when you're combining MBTI with Enneagram, right? So MBTI right here, and then this would be the Enneagram tri-type. All right. So the problem, though, is that this is an ego, right? And the problem is, though, is that this is also an ego. And people just don't really know themselves very well. So when they're doing the Enneagram, the Enneagram tests for the ego as well as the MBTI tests the ego. But the thing is that these end up not equating always because they just don't know themselves that well. The test can be very complex, or one of them can be super complex and the other one's simple. Either way, it ends up creating a problem. And this ultimately leads to confusion, which then causes people to just not really care, about either of them. They're quick to dismiss Enneagram. They're quick to dismiss Myers-Briggs type indicator entirely, and this can cause a lot of issues. So I would recommend avoiding that outcome entirely if possible. So let's look at Ucha. So let's look at what Ucha does. So Ucha over here, what we've been using, what it does is it takes the ego, which is a person's nature, right? And then it takes their octagram. That is inaccurate, and I don't know why I did that. Let's get rid of this, please. Gross. Let's get rid of this. All right, so, and then their octagram, but then this is only their nurture, right? Whereas over here, let's use that color. Over here you have ego plus actually, it's not going to work either. Excuse me. Did that wrong again. Trying to keep it as accurate and easy to understand so that when people watch this, they don't have as big of a problem. All right, so what you have here is nature. It's a formula. Plus nature plus nurture. However, this is in parentheses. Let's undo that last one. Okay, so those are in parentheses. Whereas over here, it's just nature plus nurture. Okay, so what ends up happening is that in this model, you have an inaccurate result. Inaccurate result using this model. But if we actually take our time to actually understand what's happening, this equals an accurate result. Okay? So it's really important that when you're considering comparing Enneagram to Octogram, you understand this entire concept. Because if you look at both systems, you look at MBTI plus Enneagram, you're literally getting two pieces of nature in there, which is basically inhibiting the result. Whereas with Ucha, we properly separate nature and nurture when it comes to eco and Octogram, from our personality assessment. So like when you're going to take the guided mode, which is going to be called Type Yourself, and those questions are basically going to be Octogram. They're going to be nurture for identifying your nurture. And then once we understand your nurture, then the system can actually extrapolate further and also like identify environmental causes or environmental impact, as well as spiritual causes and spiritual impact. I don't want to talk about environmental versus spiritual related things. That is extremely new. I'm not comfortable talking about that, so I'm not going to be discussing that today. But I am just trying to use this cutting edge lecture to kind of lay down the foundation of Octogram so that, it's easier on everybody to consider moving forward. Please note that we do have the Discuss Octogram channel inside of Discord. So let me bring that up here. Let me go into the Discuss Octogram channel. So here it is. So Octogram is pure nurture. You already have Chris here educating people. But if you want to get access to the Discuss Octogram channel, and we got tons of pinned messages in here about what all this stuff means and all the little symbologies that we've added for it. But yes, it's all in here. Get on the server if you want to actually be a part of this discussion. Discuss Octogram channel right here on the Ego Hackers Discord is the #1 place to get involved. Some people are talking about it on the Facebook group, but it's not as active as here. And right now we have 989 people, and I think like they're all active with like maybe 50 of them are inactive in this Discord server. It's an extremely active server. And as you can see here, people are already starting to use the Octogram nomenclature, which helps you identify their development versus cognitive focus, okay, which we're going to talk about in a second, okay? So make sure that you are aware of that. Please participate in the Discuss Octogram channel. Please, please, please. That would be great. Actually, I'm going to... I'm going to just minimize it there. Cool. All right. So this is the general foundation as how it works. So just remember that Octogram is literally pure nurture, while Enneagram is nature plus nurture. So, and ultimately, what you have to understand is like this is what the Enneagram is attempting to do. They're trying to say what your tri-type is. But what is tri-type actually? Tri-type equals ego plus development plus focus. That is what tri-type actually is. That is what tri-type actually is. So yeah, ego plus development plus focus. Ego plus cognitive development plus cognitive focus. That is what tri-type actually is. That is what Enneagram is trying to do on its own. Because inside here, it's literally trying to do ego, development, and focus. Okay? That's what it's trying to do. And then MBTI muddies the waters with additional ego, right? So you have 2 ego, and then this creates inaccurate results. So why should we bother doing it the old way when the old way is completely wrong? You know, the new way, the proper way of identifying tri-type right here is properly separating nature and nurture. Okay? That's how it is. And then tri-type equals ego plus development plus focus. That's what it means. That's what it does. That's what it's all about, okay? So, no problem. All right. So now I'm going to delete this so you guys can understand. All right, so we're moving forward. All right. So, so this comes down to nature versus nurture, okay? And then ego. And then we have development and focus, okay? So previously, you'd hear me say, like, you know, so I'm an ENTP, right? So let's, so previously, you know, you'd hear me say, okay, yeah, I'm an ENTP, but I'm shadow focused, okay? So this is like the traditional way, you know, versus shadow focused also means unconscious focused, and then there's obviously subconscious focused. That was the old way of saying things, and this is the incorrect way. This is now the incorrect way. Do not say it anymore. We're moving on from this. And I know that I said it a lot, but we've further refined this system into something that's actually far more accurate, and it was necessary to do because of Octogram. It's entirely necessary to do. And I have to give Chris Taylor huge kudos in this area because he's the one that kind of led in this direction because he had some concerns about how, you know, how we've been, you know, portraying cognitive focus to the audience was not being done properly. And the reason why is because of these two things. You have introverted sensing and you have introverted intuition. So a person's introverted sensing is where they have been. So let's actually write that down. Where they have been versus where they are going. Where they are going. Okay? And these two things are very important. So, and then what we realized is that from an SI perspective, people already have an established development or an area of their mind that they've already developed. And then they have a place that they're going, which is their focus, okay? So then what this ended up doing is that this adjusted, from an octogram point of view, what I would look like. So I ended up with my octogram, I look like this, which is unconscious, developed, and unconscious focus, right? Okay, so this is my octogram piece right here. This is octogram right here, all right? And then together, all three of these pieces, because there's three pieces here, but let's actually write this in a way that makes a lot more sense. I mean, if we really, really, really want to get down to brass tacks and actually look at what it is and what it's all about in terms of the proper way of writing it, I'll now show you. Okay. So for me, I'd be an ENTP pipe symbol, UD pipe symbol, UF. Okay? This is how it should be. And this represents my tri-type. Okay? This represents my tri-type right here. Because I have ego, I have development, and I have focus right there. All right. So this is the proper way to express octogram because this is the tri-type. Ego, development, focus. Ego, development, focus. Ego, development, focus. Okay? How you write a tri-type down properly. Oh my god. That is so annoying. I don't know why it keeps doing this. Good. My display keeps crashing. I don't know why. Let's, there we go. Cool. Okay, so yeah. So that's my tri-type. That's how you express tri-type with octogram, basically. So let's go a little bit further, and let's actually look at each of the individual octogram pieces. Let me erase this. That's plenty of room. We're good to go there. All right. So let's translate what some of these pieces actually mean for you folks. Okay. So we have so UD equals unconscious development. Or unconscious developed, we'll say. And then UF equals, obviously, unconscious focus. All right? And then we have SD equals subconscious development. And then SF equals unconscious focus. Okay? All right, so remember what I'm saying down here. this right here would be me saying, originally, using the old way of saying it, would just mean I'm shadow focused with the old way of saying it. But really that's not entirely true, because shadow focus indicates this piece, the UD piece. That's all it was. I'm not even talking about, so basically what I should have said in the past, I should have said shadow developed. And this is where Chris Taylor corrected me, and I needed to be corrected because it was inaccurate. And he realized in his expert thinking trial that the semantics were off, and this is leading to confusion within people in the community, because I'm talking about which of my specific sides of my mind, which of the sides of my mind were actually developed. So really, what focus really just means is like, what side of my mind am I actively working on now or going to actively work on? Whereas developed is that it's where my mental work has already been. Have I done the shadow work, for example? So remember, it's the difference between the SI plus the NI for each individual. So the SI, so this is SI here, and this is also SI here for the developed pieces, unconscious developed and subdevelopment, but the NI is for the focus. So person's NI, where they're going. Okay, so makes sense. So unconscious developed versus so yeah. So that would basically mean that, you know, Sarah is ISTP and she is UDSF. Would be hers. She'd be UDSF. That would be her octagram, basically. Unconscious developed, and then subconscious focus. She's working on her subconscious focus while already have developed her unconscious throughout her life, basically. Now, let's go a little bit further while we're discussing this tri-type. So I'm going to clear the board again here, and then let's go in a different direction. Let's actually look at the combinations of octagram. So, octagram combinations. This is really important. And by the way, I want to reiterate one more time that when I was saying ENTP shadow focus, or whenever I've traditionally said, and traditionally said is basically from last week and older, okay? So, or just say July 2022 and older. Anytime I would say shadow focus or subconscious focus, I was really saying shadow developed and unconscious developed or subconscious developed. That's what I was actually saying, okay? So just be aware of that. So I'll write those up here, just, you know, so you guys know. So unconscious focus in the old days equals unconscious developed. And then sub-focused in the old days, knows how it's past tense, was development. So this is the old model. Okay, this is old and deprecated now. We've moved on to a new way of representing this for the sake of octagram. So this is the old way. Okay, so whenever I said unconscious focused, or whenever I said subconscious focused previously, that means unconscious developed. That means subconscious developed. It does not talk about U, F, or SF. That was completely removed in the old way. Okay, so let's identify. Let's look at the different combinations. Okay, so there's UD, SF. There's also SD, UF. Okay, why does this matter? Because you will always have development and focus like this. Is it a U? Question mark. Is it an S? Question mark. Is it an S, question mark, or is it a U, question mark? Two different ways to answer D or F, basically. Two different ways. Two different ways. So we have these different combinations. So from this, we have these. Okay? So we also have UD, UF, and we have SD, SF. Okay, so let's write down some interesting things about these combinations that we have here. So these are typical. That's typical. This is typical. However, these down here are atypical. Atypical. So typical is they are common. Common nurtural impact. Common nurture. Whereas these, the atypicals, are rare nurture. They just don't really happen that often. Pretty rare. So atypicals are rare. And then here's Chase right here, UDSF. Here's Chris. Right? And then Sarah's right here, for example. Right here we have Logan Paul. Right here, we've got Jake Paul as well. We also have Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift. So the point is that there are four subvariants of each of the 16 types, okay? Which basically means you have, let's change our color here. You have 16 types times 4 variants times 2 genders, basically, with equals total combinations of human nurture. Total combinations of human nurture. Okay? So 16 times 4, that's 64 times 2. It's 128 total combinations of human nurture out there. Right? So knowing their gender is very, very important. So 128, it's a base 4 system. Ultimately, that's what Octogram is all about. An Octogram is utilized to show tri-type. Tri-type is ego plus development plus focus, and then that tri-type is contained within one of the 2 genders because the genders think differently, okay? And that's why there are 128 total combination of human nurture. Here's the kicker. Your Octogram can change. It changes as you age. It does not change very often, and some people it changes more than others. I believe that it changes often for typical, so changes a lot over their life, and atypical changes little. So okay, so let's talk about SDSF. Like, what is the difference here? Let's look at the 4 main Octogram combinations. So UDSF, SDUF, which are the typical combinations. These are very common. Most people have this. And then there's the atypical, which is UD, UF, and SDSF. So basically, it's because these types have doubled down. So like, I have unconscious development in my life, but I've chosen to stay focused on furthering developing my unconscious. So what this means is me see if I get a different color in here. We'll attempt gray. But SDSF is all about getting closer to one's ego, whereas UDUF is closer to one's superego. So traditionally, this is what we would call, so I'm UDUF, so this is traditionally, almost traditionally, what I would have called superego focus. And then SDSF is traditionally what I would call ego focus. Although superego focus and ego focus don't technically exist. They don't exist. You can't be focused on your superego or ego. It's just that UDUF and SDSF, the atypical octagram combinations, they are closer, much closer to their ego or the superego than the typical nurturers of the other types. Typical nurturers are just more they spend their time having relationships with their unconscious and their subconscious, whereas the UDUF and SDUS, the atypical ones, spend more time attempting to have a relationship with their ego, deep in their ego, and their superego. But we can't actually say that they're ego focused or superego focused. Now, for a long time, I've been telling people, and this is where one of the few times you'll ever hear about C.S. Joseph offering a retraction. This entire lecture, this cutting-edge lecture, is a retraction. It has many retractions. I've retracted what I've said about, the old way of thinking, which is the unconscious, so the unconscious focus, sub-focused, ego-focused, superego-focused. This is all deprecated. This is a retraction, okay? That's a retraction. Octogram is the new standard, and that's what we're going to be using moving forward. This is all deprecated. This is a retraction. Now, I have said in the past how, here's another retraction. It's personally for me. I said in the past, so my midlife crisis started October 14th. I believe it's October 14th. 2021. That's when my midlife crisis officially started. And it's been rough. Still ongoing. But with my midlife crisis, I find myself in situations where it ends up becoming a pretty big struggle for me over time, especially since I told people within this audience, hey, I tell the ego hacker community, I'm like, hey, yeah, I'm working on my subconscious right now. But that couldn't have been further from the truth. That's not accurate at all. Since breaking my foot in October 14th, 2021, and since breaking my foot in the same location, basically a second time within a year, I come to realize that it's not accurate. Because what my mind did to compensate was not really focusing on my inferior function. Because I have ISFJ subconscious. If I really am developing my subconscious, I'm hammering my inferior function and doing a lot of self-discipline and duty and endurance-related activities. But I wasn't. I assumed I was, but I really wasn't. What I was actually doing is getting closer to my expert sensing demon, because all of the activities that I was doing to get through my midlife crisis were actually all performance related. Taking up martial arts, measuring my food, losing fat, gaining muscle, lifting weights consistently, learning breakdancing, learning dance. I'm taking singing classes right now. It's all performance based. It's all expert sensing. Getting a new wardrobe, changing my look, adjusting my hair, the mohawk, etc. All of those are extroverted sensing related activities. They are not introverted sensing related activities. So what had happened is that I was already unconscious developed, and this event happened in my life, and I was at a crossroads where I have to choose. Am I going to start focusing on working on and developing my subconscious, or am I going to double down and dig my heels in and start developing my unconscious, hence unconscious focus? And I, for a long time, assumed I was working on my subconscious, but it's not true. It wasn't really until Chris Taylor offered challenge recently to me, and he's like, hey, with his F5 parent, I don't feel that's accurate because look at what you're doing. And because he's like, this has to thematically make sense. What you're doing is kind of out of theme. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I took inventory of my activities. I took inventory of how I was spending my time, what my priorities were, especially in relation to my midlife crisis. And I realized that everything was extroverted sensing related. It was not introverted sensing related at all. So what I've done is I've basically abandoned my subconscious entirely. Why is this relevant? So it's relevant for a lot of reasons, a ton of reasons. In my life, and so I'm going to share a little bit about me as part of this retraction. So I realized I was focused on extroverted sensing, which means I'm actually doubled down and still focusing on developing my unconscious, which is naturally bringing me closer and closer to my superego. And this is what we would have called superego focus back in the day, even though that's technically a misnomer in its own right. But let's talk about me a little bit. Talk about my childhood. So this last week, my mother was looking at a brain aneurysm. She was in the hospital. It's really rough. She texted me randomly telling me how much she loved me or whatever. And I didn't even know she was in the hospital. But I responded to her and basically was like, okay, well, you clearly don't want me. You don't invite me to anything. You go and have fun with other family members. You leave me out of it entirely, which sucks. She also, I also basically hold her accountable. And I'm like, look, she's like, well, I got to protect myself from you. I got to protect others from you. And I'm like, well, I've had to protect myself from you since I was 4 years old. That's what I told her. And I also said to her, like, it's really lame that you and my dad put the church above me, that you put the church above your own children. I've never had healing from that. And then you tell me that, like, I'm attacking you. You tell me, like, and I told her, like, look, I'm not initiating abuse. You are. You've always initiated the abuse. I'm responding to your abuse. Stop initiating the abuse. That's what I keep trying to explain to her. And for the first time in my life, she actually admitted to it. She admitted that, yes, she put church above her own family, and she was sorry about that. I was fascinated by this. Had no idea I was in the hospital. The conversation ended at that point. Later in the day, she called me and said, I've been in the hospital today and they're looking at a brain aneurysm and this is really serious, etc. Ended up being egregiously high cholesterol, and I got her on a diet that reduces triglycerides in her bloodstream, because triglycerides are created from sugar, and that's the sticky substance that causes the, quote, bad cholesterol to stick to the good cholesterol or whatever. And then that ultimately leads to heart disease, stroke, and aneurysms, and then death, ultimately. But I got her on this diet to burn the triglycerides out of her bloodstream so that it doesn't happen again, at least. And so far, she's been doing it, which is great. She actually listened to me for once in that regard. So, because she's so easily gaslit by anyone who is an authority because of her fanaticism. My mother is a UDSF for her Octogram. She's unconscious development, but subconscious focused. She's focusing on developing her ENTP side, even though she's pretty much mostly developed her ESFP side the majority of her life, basically. So she's UDSF. So it was good to have that admittance, but then I'm like, wow, she only admitted that because all of a sudden she's faced with her mortality and her priorities changed, which, I'll take what I can get. She admitted to it. I'm pretty happy about that. But here's the kicker. Why am I talking about this story? Because throughout my childhood, so you guys can look at what a UD-UF atypical type is. That's why I'm doing this. Throughout my childhood, my extroverted feeling child was worthless. I got zero reward for being FE child. I hate my child function. I hate it with a passion. I hate my child function so much. I hate my child function so much that I'm willing to sacrifice it to the demon within in exchange for the demon's power, basically. So it's like I'm literally committing psychological demon sacrifice, child sacrifice to demons within my own soul. It's kind of freaky when I say that. And no, I'm not trying to sound like an occultist or a Satan worshiper when I say that either. I'm just telling you, like, metaphysically, archetypically, what's happening within my own soul. I hate my child function. But why? My mother is an ISFJ, and I can't go into my ISFJ subconscious in the environment I was growing up with because her ego already took the role of ISFJ within our home. There was no room for it. Not only that, but at least she had extroverted feeling pessimistic. But could I use my extroverted feeling from an optimistic perspective? No, because my father is an ENFJ, and he took up the space for extroverted feeling optimistic because it's a hero function for an ENFJ. Therefore, my extroverted feeling child didn't have any room to exist in my family or in my childhood ever. And because of that, it was grossly underdeveloped. It was grossly misused. So whenever I use FE child, it's either insanely overused and I become overly compassionate to the point of becoming a doormat, or I'm not compassionate enough and I become entirely hateful or dismissive or apathetic, or I just don't care. So FE child is like a little kid that's also developed me behind. My extroverted feeling child is literally special ed because it never got the opportunity to grow. And here I am, a 35-year-old man with a special ed extroverted feeling child function that even if I try to use it in my adulthood, it still blows up in my face. Still blows up in my face. And because I can't use my extroverted feeling child in this way, because of that, it's on axis with my TI parent. It makes my TI parent's growth slowed as well on axis. And then because of that environment, my family environment forced me to use my FI trickster and use my trickster instead of my child function through cognitive orbit. Okay? So basically, I'm an ENTP who is forced against my will because of my family. See, this is why the nuclear family is stupid. The nuclear family is stupid. It destroys lives. It destroyed my life. Because what's going to happen if you're born into a nuclear family where everyone's incompatible with you? What are you going to do then? What are you going to do? See, you're going to end up like me. You know, Logan Paul, Jake Paul, Taylor Swift, the SDSF types, they're the types that go all out on happiness. And they're super happy people. But they're also mega immature. Whereas you have people like Chris and I, we're super mature because of the suffering that we have in our life. Mega mature. But we deal with constant, unbridled depression. Depression that we live with. Depression that may or may not be debilitating because we're so used to the constant depression that it's just actually a part of our lives. That's all it is. It's just a part of our lives. Because we've never actually been able to get any support for our egos ever. I hate my child function. I hate my subconscious. I was never even allowed to be my subconscious. I've never even able to develop my subconscious. And it got even worse when my sister was born, yet another SFJ competing for the SFJ slot in our bullshit nuclear family. Fuck the nuclear family. Fuck it. I fucking hate it. It's so stupid. You know, if you're raised in a village or you're in a tribe, you have so many people of different psyches around that you will get, like my FE child could have gotten acceptance from somebody. But then again, you know, my own mother admits that she has to protect herself from me and protect other people from me. And it's like she's trying to save people from me. And it's like, really? Obviously, my FE child is not accepted. So it's been abused. And it's been abused because she is ignorant of type. She is ignorant of psychology. Because the nuclear family is ignorant of psychology. And because of the nuclear family, I ended up a chronically depressed, but because I'm so used to that depression, it's not debilitating to me. A chronically depressed, high maturity ENTP in the form of UF. Unconscious development, unconscious focus. You look at Logan Paul, you look at Jake Paul, you look at Taylor Swift, they're mega immature, but they're mega, mega happy. And they're super mega successful in their life. Obviously, people like them would have to exist on the opposite side of the spectrum. That's where myself and Chris Taylor, hell, that's where Andrew Tate is. That's possibly where Jordan Peterson is as well. You see what I'm saying? The opposite side of the spectrum exists. High maturity with high depression, with high happiness and high immaturity. Okay? Those are the difference. These are the atypical octogram nurtural things. And because of the environment that I grew up in, the familial environment I grew up in, extroverted feeling child is literally special ed right now. It is special ed. It is so behind development because my ego never got the chance to use it. And when it uses it, it's so dumb. So because of this, throughout my life, I've never actually really had success. So let's talk about why people they prefer to use different sides of their mind, why they prefer to develop certain sides of their mind to begin with. Talking about development alone, not focus. It's because in your life, it's like, hey, you're presented with problems and situations that you have to get through as a person, right? And some problems you have to get through as a person, you could get through it with using just your ego's functions. Great. If that happens to you, congratulations. And sometimes you realize if you aspire with your ego functions within your subconscious, you can actually up your performance and even get a better result than you were able to before. And that's what leads to subconscious development. Or in my case, where my mother is already a crusader, my grandmother is already a crusader, my sister is already a crusader, my ego functions are not accepted and have no use within my nuclear family growing up. So as a result, I have to start developing my unconscious and using my unconscious functions to get through my day-to-day, to be able to solve day-to-day problems, right? It's a problem. It's an issue. Okay? Like this is a thing. Okay? Like this is where unconscious development comes from. So you have to use your shadow function because remember, your 8 cognitive functions in your head is a toolbox. The first half of your toolbox is your ego, those are your preferred tools. The second half is these other tools that you don't use very often. So haven't you ever seen those people like STPs and they're building houses? Or here's a good example. You watch Tin Cup with Kevin Costner, and he does an entire golf game and does pretty well with just a 7-iron. He's able to get everything done with the 7-iron. The 7-iron is his hero function. But eventually, he comes up to a hole where he can't use a 7-iron, and he's got to use a different golf club, which is a different function, right? It could be his nemesis function. See what I'm saying? That's a good movie example of what's going on here. So for me, I couldn't learn to use my first 4 preferred tools in my 8-tool toolbox. And not only could I not learn, I had no hope of aspiring to learn them better so I could just be really, really good at those tools. I was forced by my upbringing through human nurture to learn how to use the other 4 tools that I was not used to. And this is why I became unconscious developed. But here's the thing. It was so bad because in my 20s, struggling with homelessness, struggling with debt, $120,000 of debt, struggling with hard work, struggling with insane amounts of health problems, autoimmune liver disease, a whole bunch of crap, which I don't have to deal with anymore because I figured that out, thank God. Being a horrible obesity, my hell of a marriage. My 20s were a complete waste. And still, and dealing with the Crusaders in my ex-wife's family and all of that, still my extroverted feeling child, still special ed, still couldn't use it. So in my 20s, still same problem. So I went deeper into my unconscious development to use those other things. So I stayed unconscious focused. And then post this midlife crisis, I also doubled down because my extroverted feeling child is still not accepted. It still is a problem, and it's so behind, it's so underdeveloped that it's inhibiting me from using my subconscious properly. It's inhibiting me from aspiring with my subconscious. And if I tried to aspire with my subconscious, I would actually be selling myself short. I would actually be going backwards. Think about it. Think about it. Socially, is an ISFJ actually accepted by society? Is it accepted by my family? No. Is it accepted by my community? No. Is it accepted by the church? No. Is it accepted by women? No. No, it's not, because it's feminine. I don't want to be more feminine. I want to be more masculine. So, as a result of my midlife crisis, I double down, dig my heels in, and maintain my unconscious development further. And now I'm focused on developing my unconscious further, because it's as if I am learning to aspire with my unconscious now, which is allowing me to use the power of my superego instead of my subconscious as the road to happiness. Where within my soul, I have to risk a trek through hell itself in order to get to the other side, and hoping that heaven is on the other side. I am literally walking through Dante's Inferno, hoping that Persephone and heaven is on the other side. Because that's just how my life went. And there are people like that out there. That's Andrew Tate. That's Chris Taylor. That's me. We're the atypical, unconscious developed, unconscious focused people. You look at Logan Paul, Jake Paul, Taylor Swift. Those are the subconscious developed, subconscious focused people. They are on the opposite side of the spectrum. Input error asks, by the way, don't ever put the F before the D. The D is always before the F, input error. Always. The D is always on the left and the F is always on the right. As you can see within our diagram that we have here, D is always on the left, F is always on the right. So when you're saying it properly, you have to say S or U, but the D is on the left, and then S or U, and then the F is on the right. Okay? So just so you know. But input error, he's asking, are not only atypical, but they're a sign of lack of growth or growth in a negative direction? No. You're still growing. It's just what direction you're growing into. That's all it is. Nurture is just the compass or the direction that you're growing into. That's all it is. Just what direction am I growing? That's it. Where have I grown and where am I growing? Introverted sensing, where have I grown? Introverted intuition, where am I growing? For the self. Okay? So my personal introverted sensing, aka my own experience, is my development. My own personal introverted intuition, which is where I want to take myself. Everyone has this. Everyone has an SI function. Everyone has an NI function. But it's not about the functions. I'm talking about the greater SI and NI for yourself, even from a temple perspective, from a four sides of the mind, cognitive development, cognitive focus perspective. Every person has a personal experience, which is the grand SI for them. Everyone has places, things that they want, and things that they want to take themselves. Dreams, right? That's the greater meta NI for themselves. So your development is based on a person's personal experience, and their focus is based on where they're planning on taking their development next, or where they're actively working on their development now. That's all that is, okay? So it is not a sign of lack of growth. It is just which direction you took your growth and why. Atypical means those are just rare. They're rare with growth. Typical people are the other ones, and it's very common. And their octogram can change a lot, but atypicals, their octogram changes a little. Okay, that's what it means. Please note, however, even a baby. My son, he's 17 months. My INTJ son, he's 17 months. He is SD, SF currently, as a 17-month-old. That can change. But remember, he's 17 months, so this entire SI of his life, the sum of his life, is the sum of his SI is 17 months. And within that 17 months, he is SD, subdeveloped. Okay? And he's still focusing on his subconscious at his level. Just look at, and you can look at anyone's octogram, but you have to understand he's only 17 months, which means that's still subject to change as he gets older. It's subject to change. You know? He was just around his brother a lot, his INFJ brother a lot recently. that was interesting. But it made him want to aspire more with his ego, because within his family, his ego is accepted. His child function is accepted. In my family, my nuclear family, nope, it wasn't. So I went to a different direction. You could literally see how, and I'm not saying that a family is being abusive per se when this happens. It's just nurtural. I had an ISFJ and an ESFJ in my immediate family and an FE here on my immediate family. There is no room for my extroverted feeling child. There's no room for ISFJ subconscious development. No room for it whatsoever. So I had to go deep in my unconscious, and I'm even going even deeper as per my midlife crisis to gain the power of my superego to be able to move forward. I am literally aspiring with my unconscious towards my superego so that I can get to my subconscious as the shadow of my superego later. The subconscious being the heaven or the Persephone that I'm trying to get to while I risk the fires of hell as I walk through the trek through the darkness of my superego, right? That's how that works, okay? So I think I've hammered this up. Okay, input error asks, okay, so UDUF is like swimming into the colder and colder depths of the ocean to reach the core of the planet. Yes. And SDSF is flying into the heat towards the sun. That's correct. Yes. Very well said. I have a much closer relationship with the abyss than I do the sun. But at least I'm not going to be like Icarus and have my wings melt as I get closer to the sun. You know what I'm saying? But you are absolutely correct about that input error. Thank you for stating that, and the audience will definitely come to that. So it'll help them reach that conclusion. So anyway, folks, that concludes today's episode for the Cutting Edge Podcast, August 2022. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Hopefully we'll have another Octogram episode next month, but I just wanted to give you guys an overview as to how it works, how the nomenclature works, where it came from, comparing it to the Enneagram versus, old versus new, etc., just so that you guys can be aware of what's coming around the corner and how we're going to be adding it to the test and then utilizing Octogram moving forward. So anyway, thanks for watching, folks, and I will likely see you all tonight on the Discord. Later.